Welcome to Serving the Valley. This is a program from Cedar Falls Television that gets you up close and personal, and maybe a little bit about what makes this part of Iowa such a great place to call home. My name's Roy Justice. Today, it's Iowa's gift to the world, the Ponseti method, and my guest is Dr. Thomas Cook from Iowa City. Tom, welcome to the program.
Thank you, Roy. Great to be here.
Iowa's gift to the world. It's called the Ponseti method. You're going to learn a little bit about that as the program rolls on. I'm not going to give Dr. Tom Cook the kind of introduction he deserves because there's a whole lot to this Ponseti method. We've got to take time and introduce you perhaps by showing this Ponseti method, and that's the object of our affection today. But I will tell you, Tom is emeritus of Occupational and Environmental Health from the College of Public Health at the University of Iowa. I thought you retired.
For a day or two, yeah.
I see. Let's talk real quickly about what the problem was or is.
Sure. Clubfoot is the most common musculoskeletal deformity or deformity in the world. We don't see a lot of it in the U.S., but there are about 200,000 children around the world, one in every 750 live births, where the child is born with their foot turned down and in, making it difficult to walk and get through life. That means about every 3 minutes there's a child somewhere in the world born with this deformity.
We're seeing, I guess, somewhat of a definition of clubfoot right there. When is it first recognized? Right at birth?
Well, if the mother has an ultrasound examination, you can identify it as early as 14 or 16 weeks, usually the 16 or 18-week ultrasound. Obviously, in many parts in the world, there's no ultrasound opportunity, so the child is born, as you see from the pictures, an otherwise healthy child most of the time, not really associated with any other major problems. It's just that the feet are turned down and in. This is the model that we use to train physicians and to demonstrate. So basically, otherwise normal leg, otherwise normal individual, but the foot is turned in many cases even more severely turned down and in than this.
So that's the problem.
Well, the problem is really in the muscles in the lower leg
Okay.
that cause the foot to be deformed. It's manifest as a foot problem,
Okay.
Skeletal problem. Again, as an example, this is what an adult version of a clubfoot would look like. So the foot is down and turned in, but it's in that position because the muscles in the leg have an asymmetry in their development. The muscles that pull the foot up and turn it in are tighter and stiffer than normal. They overcome the tendency of the other muscles to more balance the foot. So it appears as a foot deformity, but it's really an inherent muscular imbalance further up in the leg.
So we said the gift was the Ponseti method.
Right.
First of all, it gets its name from
Dr. Ignacio Ponseti, who came to the University of Iowa in the early 1940s, 1941 exactly. One of his first assignments was, as most residents at the time had, was to look at the outcomes of surgery that had been done in the previous 20 years. He immediately concluded that surgery was not a long-term possibility and decided there must be a better way. So by the late 1940s, he had figured out that much like orthodontics with crooked teeth, that you could slowly and progressively realign the foot and do that very effectively by a series of plaster casts. So that, again, you see some examples here of what it is, the walk untreated. But the basic procedure is to, in a very precise way, move the foot into a more normal position, to apply a plaster cast, allow a week or so for the tissues to readjust. As I mentioned, some of the muscles are short and tight, others are overstretched. So you allow about a week for the tissues to normalize a bit. A week later, you take that cast off, do a little more stretching, again, very similar to what you would do in orthodontics with your teeth, and allow, as Dr. Ponseti would say, allow the foot to take the shape that nature intended. And typically, after 4 to 6 casts, the typical clubfoot can be totally realigned and assume a normal functional position.
So this was back in the 40s?
The late 1940s, he had this figured out and began treating patients here in Iowa. He published a number of really high quality articles and research projects in the medical literature, but unfortunately the medical profession wasn't very receptive. They thought that surgery, they were much more in favor of surgery. And the issue with surgery, certainly a surgeon in an hour's time can go in and, cut the tissues that are too short and lengthen other tissues and rearrange the foot and put a couple pins in the bones, and an hour later it looks like a normal foot. The problem with surgery is that the long-term results are not a bit good. By the time the patients are in their 20s and 30s, there are numerous studies now to show that, that there's severe, serious arthritis, stiffness, pain, and unfortunately, sometimes the long-term result is that the patients are wheelchair bound and sometimes seek an amputation because of a painful, dysfunctional foot. And that's what Dr. Ponseti figured out in the 1940s, but the medical establishment took decades to recognize that. The real breakthrough was in the late 1990s on the internet, is when Dr. Ponseti published his book in 1996, and parents got on the new internet at the time, and realized that there were alternatives to surgery, that long-term surgery was bad, and it was really the parents who began insisting that the doctors learn Dr. Ponseti's method and apply it.
Now, we come to the brace.
Yes, just like orthodontics, if the children don't wear their retainer for a while to hold the teeth straight, the tendency is to get crooked again.
Right.
Same thing with clubfoot. The genetic code that's in there that says these muscles should be shorter and these ligaments should be thicker, it's still there. So the need is to wear a brace, just like a retainer for orthodontics. And the children wear this when they sleep, because when the child is active during the day, they're up and moving, they're stretching things, everything's fine. At night when they relax, the feet want to turn in again, just like the teeth want to get crooked again.
Yes.
So the need is to wear a pair of very comfortable shoes, typically on a bar, like you see here, that hold the feet sort of out and up and oppose the tendency for the feet to curl back in again. If the child wears these sort of sleepy shoes, or whatever it takes to convince the kid they should wear them at night, if they wear their sleepy shoes until they're 4 years old, they have less than 5% chance that the problem will reoccur. So this is really an important part of the process. The challenge is, of course, that you've got very small little feet beginning at 2, 3, 4 months old until they're age 4. So you need very comfortable shoes, something that won't irritate the skin. You need something that's easy to put on and take off, easy to clean, and something that's very user-friendly for the parents, because it is a bit of a hassle, more so for some children than others. And this was a device developed here at the University of Iowa that we've been able to patent and mass produce and make available, particularly in developing countries, because they have problems with materials, with developing a really comfortable shoe. So this Iowa brace, we now have about 30,000 of these in places like Pakistan, Nigeria, South Africa, and we're very happy. I just returned on Friday from Nigeria, and I can tell you that they have several thousand of these in use with children in Nigeria. No skin problems. The doctors are ecstatic that they've got something that works so much better than the locally produced coarse leather devices. So I think this is we're very happy that we're able to solve this part of the problem. We usually say that the correcting of clubfoot is the doctor's responsibility. The maintaining of clubfoot is the parent's responsibility, and we need to give them the tools to do that.
This hasn't been an automatic pushing the button and every country says, oh, come on in.
No. There are certainly, in many developing countries, a lot of cultural issues that we work with, and that's sort of the public health aspect of this. And that is, we need to create awareness that this deformity is treatable. You can imagine a rural village in Rwanda. You're one of 750 parents who have a child with clubfoot, which means you're probably the only one in the villages for miles around who has a child with clubfoot. And in those less educated, more rural areas, people try their best to explain why. I mean, the guilt trip for parents is significant,
yes,
especially in those rural communities. Here, for example, you can see on the screen, this is a little guy named Rilwin. I happened to be in the clinic in Ife, Nigeria, the day he came in. Rilwin was born with 2 club feet. The knees you see on the right are his grandmother's because his father couldn't tolerate having a deformed male offspring and pretty much kicked him out of the house. Grandma took him in 7 years before this picture, and he was living with her. He actually was crawling around when he was found by one of the doctors in the village because he was too unstable to walk. And here you see on the left side how he tried to manage with his 2 club feet. You can kind of understand in a village with no paved surfaces that crawling was a less hazardous way to get around.
Well, and that's him on the right.
And on the right, you see Rilwin after 5 casts on the Ponseti method, even at the age of 7. And he's not walking perfectly yet because he hasn't walked for 7 years. But this is his school uniform. He's now going to school, and his dad said, yeah, it's okay now that he can collect firewood, carry water, walk to school, he can come back and live home. So it's one of many, many life-changing stories of what this Ponseti method can do to change lives.
So part of the process of what you have been doing in retirement
Yeah.
is traveling and help to open the doors.
Yeah, mostly what I do, I work very closely with Dr. Morkwende at the University of Iowa, who is essentially Dr. Ponseti's understudy and has been here for 20 years doing this and traveling the world. He's done over 100 training programs in various countries around the world. He and I were in Nigeria last week on a couple return visits. So he trains the doctors, but it's more than training the doctors. As I mentioned, it's these cultural issues.
Yes.
It's the idea that this is a curse from our ancestors. This is the way God or Allah meant this child to live. They don't even really seek treatment. So in order to promote this method and to accomplish a decent life for these 200,000 kids around the world, we need to train more physicians. We need to change attitudes, and we need to make this brace available to even the most remote areas of the world.
Is there something, Tom, in the DNA?
It's still unknown, unfortunately.
Okay.
You would think in modern times that we would understand, but it's what's called a polygenic condition, meaning that it's not a single gene. It's not like freckles or red hair or height or other simple genetic inheritance factors. It's most likely slight variations in multiple genes that happen to come up at the same time. I think of it as a slot machine. You pull the handle and the wheels roll, and occasionally they all come up the same. And I think that's a way to think about clubfoot. It could happen to anybody. It happens here in the US, it happens all over the world at about the same proportion, 1 in 750. So whether you're we have patients who are wealthy real estate developers in Las Vegas, dirt farmers in Rwanda, really multimillionaires in New York City. It doesn't matter. It's just one of those random things that we don't yet understand, unfortunately.
Well, this doesn't just automatically happen. There's got to be some financial involvement involved to get this done.
Absolutely. In 2006, the Board of Regents here in Iowa recognized the Ponseti International Association. And that was, Dr. Ponseti was still alive at the time. He died in 2009 at the age of 95 after seeing several patients that morning. So it's been 10 or 11 years since the Board of Regents recognized the Ponseti International Association. And this is a nonprofit organization whose mission is to promote the Ponseti method to affect the lives of these 200,000 kids every year. We run the organization totally on donations, on grants. However, we can get support for these activities. I'll mention that one of the more recent developments is the involvement of Rotary International, and in particular the Cedar Valley Rotary Club here right here in the Valley is currently working with us on a grant from Rotary International Foundation to train 50 more doctors in Mexico. We have another grant in Brazil. Part of our trip to Nigeria last week was to meet with the Rotary people there. The nice thing about Rotary and service clubs like that are that they're local, and they can support the local training of doctors, the local provision of braces. There are 3 Rotary clubs in Lagos, Nigeria that got together and were able to import several thousand of these braces to supply to the clinics there. So we're happy to be working, with again the folks right here in Cedar Valley to help out with this effort. There's certainly a lot of work to be done in many locations around the world.
Now, you mentioned Nigeria. Is that one of the hot spots, or?
It's not any hotter than any place else,
okay.
except that it has a population of 180 million. Nigeria is the most populous country in Africa. They only have 400 orthopedic surgeons, where we have 10,000 orthopedic surgeons in the US. But we've been working for almost 10 years now in Nigeria. We have a doctor who was trained by Dr. Ponseti here in 2007. He went back home, taught some other doctors, they taught some other doctors, and we now have about 60 clinics in Nigeria who are treating children with clubfoot. We estimate, for example, there are about 8,000 children born every year with clubfoot in Nigeria, and we're now able to provide treatment to about half of those children.
Okay, we have so much information to squeeze into so little time. There's a story about a boy from Brazil that we want to try to work into what we're talking about right now.
Sure, that's Octavia.
Yes.
And Octavia, you can see him here on the screen, I think. Octavia was 10 years old. He was treated by a doctor who trained here in the US, Dr. Monica Noriega, who's a orthopedic surgeon there. And again, on the left, you see what Octavia walked like, how he functioned when he came into the clinic. And on the right side is after he was treated with 7 casts, even at the age of 10. I think it's pretty clear from the video how life-changing this treatment was for him. And the thing to think about with this treatment is this doesn't require an x-ray, an anesthesiologist, an operating room, anything special. This requires a very skilled doctor who knows exactly how to manipulate and cast the feet. It requires some plaster, pretty inexpensive, available everywhere, and it requires a good brace, a good, affordable, inexpensive brace. You see the method here. This is thin cotton wrap for some cushioning, standard plaster, and you can see the treating physician's fingers holding the toes and the foot in a position. This is gentle manipulation. A lot of the babies sleep through it. It's not painful. The foot is just moved as far as it will go in a normal direction comfortably, and then allowed for, as I mentioned before, for the tissues to get adjusted. So in our minds, there's no reason that any kid in this world should go through life with the deformities and disabilities that we see in a couple of these videos, and we see particularly in developing countries. We don't see much of that in the U.S. because obviously children get treated as infants, but not being treated as an infant and trying to go through life, it's a very difficult situation for many kids in developing countries. They become beggars. They really aren't functional. They're subject to abuse, and many end up in orphanages. I would say orphanages if they're lucky. There are regions of some countries where there are very few children who survive with clubfoot, and I'm sorry to have to say that, but that's really the truth. So again, our goal here, our vision, is that we need about 4,000 treatment centers with trained providers. Again, we need this high quality brace to maintain the condition and not make sure it does not reoccur. And then we need the local support for providing the transportation and overcoming some of the local issues. Some of the difficult issues are something as simple as bus fare or transportation to the clinic, since the child has to return every week for 4 or 5 weeks to complete the treatment.
So with the help of Rotary International in these countries as well?
Oh yeah. Who would think that in one of the 36 states in Nigeria, for example, is a state called Enugu, and I'm sure most of your listeners have probably never heard of Enugu, but it's a state about 1/20th the size of Iowa with the same population, about 3 million people. In Enugu, there are 19 Rotary clubs. Who would have thought? But we really are in the process of connecting the doctor that we've trained there, who's really very skilled and hardworking, connect him with Rotary clubs to help with, again, these incidental expenses that we find are an obstacle to continuing the treatment, as well as the public awareness campaign that, yeah, there is a place where you can go and get your kid's feet corrected, and we can provide whatever little help might be needed. I've been in the clinic where the doctor looks at the child and says, oh yeah, we can fix this feet, it's no problem. We need 2 rolls of plaster to put on the first cast. Well, how much is the plaster? It's $4 a roll. And typically they would go down the hall to the pharmacy and buy the 2 rolls of plaster and bring them back, and the doctor would put them on. And the father looked at the doctor and said, I'll be back next week. Because he had to go back to the village and somehow convince the village elders, the local church, whoever it might be, relatives, to come up with the $8 to buy plaster for his kid's feet. So those are the kinds of things that local service clubs can do to see that this treatment actually gets completed and is effective.
In today's day and age, Google, and you'll get all the details you want, other than the program you're watching right now. But if someone's interested in getting more information about this, or they belong to an organization that would like to get a hold of this Tom Cook fellow for a little more detailed presentation, how would they do that?
It's very simple. It's just ponseti.info is our website. So PONSETI.info. And we're happy to talk to anyone, anywhere about this effort and about this project. We're hoping that sometime in the next 8 to 10 years, we'll be able to reach every kid everywhere in every corner of the world, so that nobody goes through life like this. But certainly promoting this really uniquely Iowa thing. I mean, it was Dr. Ponseti out of Iowa who fought for decades to promote this technique. It's the Ponseti International Association that for 10 years now has been plugging away, training doctors, the University of Iowa developing the brace, and many of the Rotary clubs and other organizations here in Iowa doing what they can to assist with that effort. This really, it's why we think of this as Iowa's gift to the world, because it is a unique contribution we can make to the quality of life and the lives of children everywhere.
Couldn't put it any better if I tried. Thank you, Tom Cook, for joining us today.
My pleasure. Thanks for the opportunity.
A reminder, you can check out what we do here and what we've done here on Channel 15 by checking us out on our Facebook page. Also, make comments, program suggestions. We're open to any of your ideas. We thank Tom Cook for coming up from Iowa City to join us on the program today. And until our next story unfolds in the Cedar Valley, I'm Roy Justice.
Clubfoot can be easily identified. On the left is a normal foot, and on the right is an example of clubfoot. Look at the foot in front and check if it rotates inside. Look at the inner part of the foot and check if it forms a deep crease. Look at the foot behind and check if the heel is turned inwards. The treatment for clubfoot, using the Ponseti method, has 3 stages: casting, tenotomy, and bracing. Casting is the process of manipulating the feet and applying plaster of Paris consecutively, once a week, for about 6 weeks. It is the first step in the overall process of correcting the feet. Almost 90% of clubfoot cases need a tenotomy, which is a minor procedure to correct the hindfoot. This can be safely done under local analgesia in a medical office or a clinic before the last cast is applied. Bracing is the last treatment. The foot abduction brace needs to be fitted and used for 3 months for 23 hours per day, and then for 12 hours every day for another 3 to 5 years. The foot abduction brace holds the foot in the corrected position and prevents recurrence. If a child drops out from the treatment or did not get accurate correction, go to the nearest clubfoot clinic for further evaluation.